Hi, good afternoon. For those that are just joining us, we'll just wait for a few moments more for a few more attendees, and then we'll crack on. Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to this number 3 of the ZDL webinar series. This session will be focusing on probably one of the unsung heroes of risk out there, and that is the risk within organizational supply chain. Probably one of the biggest risks and one of the most untreated risks that companies have to face. For those of you that have been on these before, I'll be introducing you to very familiar people shortly. For those that have heard my dulcet tones many a time, you'll be glad to know that I will not be speaking on this one as much, but leaving it to my esteemed colleagues, of which I will now introduce you to. I will hand over to Mr. Kevin Swatsridge. Good afternoon, sir.
Hi, Dan. Hello, everybody. As Dan mentioned, you may have had the good fortune or misfortune to hearing me before on other conversations like this. But yeah, for those joining for the first time, I've got about 20 years experience in technology and information security and helping organizations achieve compliance to a range of different standards, such as ISO 27001, and increasingly standards such as those and others are looking to enhance their controls around the governance of the supply chain. So making everyone accountable for how they are building their products and the suppliers that sit around them. And Steve.
Hi, thanks, Kevin. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Steve Giacardi. I'm another regular webinar attendee with Kevin. And like Kevin, I've also got about 20 odd years experience working in IT and specialised mostly in governance, risk and compliance. And like Kevin, with a big focus on ISO 27001 and third-party risk. Enough of that. We're all more excited to understand what we're doing here today. Well, today we're looking at supply chain risk, and so we've got 3 sort of main sessions, 3 main areas. We're going to be defining what we mean by supply chain risk. We're then going to be looking at ways of managing supply chain risks, and we're going to break those down into identification, impact assessment, and mitigation. And then we're going to be looking at building resilience. So what can we do to help ourselves become more resilient to supply chain risk? So without further ado, I'm going to leap into the real exciting topic of defining what is supply chain risk. So supply chain risk really refers to the potential disruptions, vulnerabilities and uncertainties that can impact the flow of goods, services and information throughout the interconnected network of suppliers, manufacturers, distributors and customers that ultimately affects organizational performance and reputation. But what is it that causes these disruptions? Well, they can come from almost any avenue. They can be totally unexpected natural events like earthquakes, hurricanes, floods, or wildfires, and these can severely impact operations, particularly for businesses that are located in those vulnerable regions. And these can also be compounded with things like geopolitical events, such as political instability, trade disputes, and diplomatic tensions, which can introduce considerable uncertainties for businesses operating in global markets. And businesses that are heavily reliant on their suppliers for things like raw materials, components, and services, any supplier failures in those areas, whether due to financial insolvency, operational disruptions, or quality issues, can disrupt your production schedules and lead to shortages, which in turn can then compromise production quality. So all of these all of these different areas can impact your supply chain. Then you've also got other things that are right out of your control, like changes in consumer preferences, economic conditions, market trends that can lead to demand fluctuations. And these can impact your sales volumes and revenue streams. And this means that businesses have got to stay agile and responsive to market dynamics, employing forecasting techniques and adaptive strategies to anticipate and address shifts in demands effectively. Equally, businesses must be aware of regulatory frameworks that they're subject to, as these are also constantly evolving and they're often driven by changing political landscapes, societal expectations, and technological advancements. Businesses operating across different jurisdictions must navigate a complex web of regulations, compliance requirements, and legal obligations. And failure to adapt to any regulatory changes can result in penalties, which can lead to reputational damage and, again, operational disruptions. And it's in this increasingly digital world that we all find ourselves working in that cybersecurity threats pose a significant risk to businesses of all sizes. Cyber attacks, data breaches, malware infections, all these can compromise sensitive information, disrupt operations, and tarnish brand reputation. So protecting digital assets and implementing robust security measures and fostering a culture of cyber vigilance are essential for mitigating the risks associated with cybersecurity incidents that we see in the supply chain. Supply chain disruptions are exacting a substantial financial toll on organizations globally, with a 2021 survey revealing that these disruptions are costing companies an average of $184 million annually. This substantial financial impact underscores the critical need for business supply chain resilience strategies and proactive risk management practices to mitigate the adverse effects of disruptions and safeguard business continuity. According to recent findings, nearly 2/3 of US businesses experienced direct impacts from software supply chain attacks within the 12-month period ending April 2023. And this alarming statistic alone underscores the pervasive and increasingly sophisticated nature of cyber threats targeting software supply chains and highlights the need for organizations to enhance their security measures and bolster resilience against such attacks. The Apache Log4j vulnerability has had enduring consequences, and this has been persisting as a significant threat to applications long after its discovery, underscoring the challenges associated with patching and securing complex software ecosystems, particularly in environments where legacy systems or dependencies block swift updates. The vulnerability was first identified in December 2021, when it sent shockwaves through the cybersecurity community due to its critical nature and widespread implications. But despite efforts to patch and mitigate the vulnerability, its impact has been far-reaching and prolonged. 2 years after its discovery, a concerning statistic emerged that as of December 2023, over 38% of applications were still using vulnerable versions of Apache Log4j. And in 2022, the impact of supply chain attacks reverberated globally, with over 10 million individuals falling victim to data compromises across 1,743 separate entities. That's roughly 5,800 people affected per attack. Now, this alarming trend underscores the far-reaching impact of supply chain vulnerabilities on both businesses and consumers. The Identity Theft Resource Center revealed a sobering reality, that the average cost of a data breach had surged to $4.45 million globally in 2023. And this emphasises the substantial financial ramifications that such breaches can have on organisations worldwide. And data breaches can occur at any point within the supply chain, from suppliers to distributors, and these can have significant financial repercussions for all parties involved. 3 years it's been following the notorious SolarWinds breach, and the Securities and Exchange Commission have finally taken legal action against SolarWinds, alleging the company misled investors regarding its cybersecurity practices and associated risks. And the SEC's action, I think, serves as a reminder to both the regulatory scrutiny and the legal consequences that companies can face in the wake of cyber incidents, and emphasises the importance that companies should have of good cybersecurity governance and transparency in this digital age that we're in. Supply chain risks are multifaceted and can stem from various sources, presenting challenges that extend beyond organisational boundaries, illustrating the complexity and interconnectedness inherent in modern supply chains. Diversification relying on a narrow range of suppliers or regions increases vulnerability to disruptions. For instance, the COVID-19 pandemic exposed vulnerabilities in supply chains heavily reliant on China for manufacturing, prompting businesses to diversify their sourcing strategies to mitigate future risks. Zero-day exploits refers to vulnerabilities in software or hardware that are unknown to the vendor or lack a patch at the time of exploitation. And these exploits can have devastating consequences, as seen in my favourite topic, SolarWinds, as seen in the SolarWinds cyber attack, where threat actors exploited vulnerabilities in software updates to infiltrate numerous organisations, including government agencies and Fortune 500 companies. Dependence on suppliers with uncertain reliability can lead to production delays, so you get quality issues or supply shortages. And the 2011 earthquake and tsunami in Japan disrupted the automotive industry's supply chain, highlighting the impact of supply reliability on global manufacturing operations. And then you've got fluctuations in economic conditions, for example, such as currency exchange rates and inflation or trade policies. These can disrupt supply chains and affect profitability. And an example of that, a real close to home one, would be the Brexit-induced uncertainties that led to supply chain disruptions and increased costs for companies operating in Europe, necessitating adaptive strategies to navigate economic volatility effectively. Addressing these supply chain risks requires a proactive and holistic approach encompassing risk assessment, mitigation strategies, and contingency planning. Organisations must foster transparency, collaboration, and resilience throughout their supply chains to mitigate the impact of disruptions and safeguard their operations in an increasingly interconnected global economy. And global supply chains are intricate networks that span across borders, connecting suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, and consumers worldwide. While these expansive networks offer opportunities for efficiency and cost effectiveness, they also introduce inherent risks that can undermine operational resilience and profitability. Supplier reliability and performance play a pivotal role in the smooth functioning of these supply chains. Dependence on suppliers with inconsistent delivery schedules, quality issues, or financial instability can disrupt production schedules, increase costs, and damage company reputations. And an example of that would be the bankruptcy of a key supplier, how that can lead to supply shortages, production delays, and financial losses for downstream partners, as evidenced by the collapse of Hanjin Shipping in 2016, which caused widespread disruptions in the maritime logistics industry. Technology and cybersecurity risks, moreover, present escalating threats to supply chain integrity and security. The growth of digital technologies and interconnected systems has expanded the attack surface for cyber threats, exposing vulnerabilities in supply chain ecosystems. Cyber attacks targeting supply chains, such as ransomware attacks, data breaches, or supply chain manipulation, can have far-reaching consequences, including operational disruptions, financial losses, and reputational damage. For example, the NotPetya ransomware attack in 2017 crippled operations for numerous organisations worldwide, highlighting the susceptibility of supply chains to cyber threats and the importance of robust cybersecurity measures. Well, I've got to say, that was a pretty bleak overview But thankfully, I'm going to hand this over to Kevin, because Kevin, you got to help me. What can we do to manage this potential minefield, buddy?
And I think what you've described there is obviously a very complex and challenging environment that all organizations are being asked to focus on in order to mitigate risk and to reduce the potential impact of cyber threats and other impacting issues. And the reality of this is it's very simple, but it's not very easy. So there's basically 3 steps to this process in order to manage it. That's what we've broken it down to. So first, identification. You can't protect what you don't understand, and Steve's favorite phrase, everything begins with A and assets. It may also begin with S and suppliers of those assets, but you have to understand the infrastructure and the supply chain that you have in order to be able to identify those risks. And having identified those risks, you can start to assess the impact of the realization of those risks should they transpire, which starts to move you towards a process of being able to rank those risks in order so you can focus your attentions on those things that are most critical to your organization. And then there's the step of defining what are those mitigation strategies? What are the things that we can do as an organization working with our supply chain to reduce the potential impact or the probability, or the key word that Steve mentioned there is resilience. How do we improve the resilience of our organization on the basis that disruption is going to happen at some point, and we want to reduce that potential impact. So let's have a look quickly first at what does the identification process look like? And there's a few things that we can do in order to be able to help ourselves with that. One of them is quite simply mapping your supply chain. So understanding the interconnectedness of that global supply chain that Steve rightly described. For manufacturing organizations or retail organizations, this may be a very complex environment where you've got your understood suppliers, both first, second, and third levels, providing each other with product and raw materials. Or it might be quite straightforward and simple. You have a flat structure whereby you have a number of suppliers that you understand that you are going to provide you with goods and services in order for your business to operate. But being able to describe that, and the example here of being able to map that visually, starts to be able to demonstrate where are the points in that supply chain that are pivotal to your organization, and where is it close to your organization, in order to be able to focus on understanding the criticality of that supplier. So we can see dependencies, we can understand vulnerabilities, and the risk of the situation is reduced by the simple being able to look through that and understand the transparency of that framework, so then we can focus on it. And this slide really is starting to look at how do we understand supplier criticality. And this has been a source of many conversations that we've had with our customers over the years, in terms of being able to define who do we spend money on and who do we focus on in order to ensure the best understanding of their cybersecurity posture or the potential risks that they face. And this is the way in which we tend to look at it. So supplier criticality is a calculation around the need of your business for the services or products that they supply, and the context of the solutions being provided. So business need is broken down into kind of 4 areas. So is it a non-essential? It might be an internal only application. Should it cease to be operable within your organization? It's unlikely to impact revenue. Your customers are unlikely to notice that. It might be slightly annoying to people, but it would be it wouldn't have a significant impact. The nice to have stuff is really, we look at that in terms of it improving internal processes, or enhances in some way service delivery. If it impacts internal processes, there might be a cost to be able to either replace that that supplier and replace that that product or service, or come up with a workaround. But it wouldn't necessarily be immediately noticed by your clients. It would be frustrating internally, and people are working overtime or whatever that may be in order to manage the situation. Then we move on to the important stuff. So this is the sort of product that optimizes the efficiency or delivers some revenue into your organization. So it would greatly reduce your ability to meet your SLAs, for instance. So it might reduce the service and degrade that for your customers. So your customers are going to be calling out and going, this application didn't work very well for us. Your lead time for delivery started to reduce. You didn't respond to my call effectively, and could ultimately result in breaches of SLA and potentially contracts therein. And then you've got the critical to revenue, those things that if you took this supplier out of my business today, I would immediately lose my ability to be able to deliver services I'm contracted to deliver to my customers. So the horrible piece that we all worry about, the loss of a data center in the cloud, or a critical application in the development process that could result in a security risk that will have an immediate impact that's going to have my customers picking up the phone and contacting us. So these are essential applications. And then we move on to understanding the solution provided, to add a little bit more context. So is it a common thing? Can I easily go and pick another one of these off the shelf? Does everyone just know how to use it? Can I just pop it into my business and it goes from pink to blue and everyone understands that how to operate with this? So it's relatively seamless in terms of that change. It might be a replaceable product that's quite easily to replace, will have some impact on cost and time to make that change, but I don't really need a change management program internally. I don't need to call on my business analyst to be able to manage that change internally. Or it might just impact a small user base. It might impact a department, a team, a small group of people that are using that application. So I can replace it quite easily. Then we move on to the hard to replace. So it's going to take significant effort. It's integrated into other systems. It could be a supplier that is providing multiple services. And there are more of that, the Microsofts, the Atlassians of this world, where there are multiple applications and services that I'm buying from a single provider. And should they become unavailable to me for whatever reason, that's going to have an impact in a number of different areas within my organization. And that's going to cost me time and resource to be able to swap that out for an alternative and or work with that supplier in order to be able to get back to an operable state. I'm probably going to have a change management program, and I'm probably going to have to train people internally as part of that change. And then there's the terrifying one, the unique one. There are not a lot of these around, but there are applications that have been specifically configured for your business. There are some suppliers that provide a unique service that you can't just go and pick off the shelf somewhere else. If that is critical in your delivery process, then that is a real problem for you, because you have no other recourse other than recreate that application on another platform, or to be able to work with that supplier to be able to resolve it. So those would be the most challenging ones. And then, of course, we're able to cross-reference these in a classic 4x4, because we love to talk about risk all the time, and it always comes back to some sort of matrix. But then what we're able to understand, we know what the business need is, we know how important this is, and this isn't about how much money that we spend with that supplier. It's about how important it is for the processes that we have as an organization. we know some of the context around our dependency within the solution that we are purchasing from the supplier, and then we can plot where they sit in the system. Hopefully they're going to sit somewhere in the bottom left-hand corner to the middle. There are, of course, going to be applications and services that are going to stay up in that top right-hand corner and be challenging for us. But having gone through this process, we're able to very effectively identify which of those suppliers would we want to apply mitigating controls to and ensure that we understand any risks that may come to bear on those organizations. So how do we kind of think about that in terms of then mapping out what do we do? So planning for that, having identified those things that sit up in those top right hand corners, the Microsofts and the AWSs of this world potentially, what are the scenarios that are likely to impact those suppliers to us and cause an issue? What do we need to look for and scan the horizon for in order to make sure that our organizations remain as resilient as possible? So we're looking for, financial stability of that organization. We're looking for impacts to transportation, those geopolitical challenges and natural disasters, all of those things that may ultimately impact those suppliers that are absolutely critical to us. And as such, certainly from a cybersecurity perspective, what we really want to be doing is monitoring those risks, and even standards like 27001 are driving us to have that ongoing dialogue with our suppliers in order to ensure that they remain compliant with the expectations of security and legislation that are required for the services they provide. So are they meeting their SLAs? Have we been able to establish service quality metrics in terms of uptime or product delivery quality markers that we need to track? Are we able to monitor the landscape to ensure that there aren't factors that may impact them? Because if we are able to identify that, then we're able to think about other opportunities to reduce risk further. And of course, our old friend cybersecurity and sending out those questionnaires and establishing and vetting to make sure that they remain compliant to their ISO 27001 certification, their alignment to PCI DSS. These are the kind of things that we need to be checking. So Steve, having identified those things, how do we go about assessing, what are we looking for in terms of the potential impact of those risks being realized?
Yeah, well, thanks, Kev. It's almost as though you got all the good bits, all the fun tools to play with. And I'm going to be sitting here again, sort of looking at the impact of these risks within the supply chains, because for me, they really spotlight how they can significantly impact an organization's financial health, their operational capability, and their reputation. And the impact of these risks, as I keep on saying, it always leads to increased costs and disruption. It's the supply chain disruption, how we can assess it. It's so almost intangible, because supply chain disruptions, inflation, or regulatory compliance requirements can lead to escalating operational expenses. For example, the implementation of new tariffs or trade barriers can increase procurement costs. So you have to understand the markets that you're looking at, you have to understand your imported raw materials and understand how those risks are going to impact your profit margins again. Market downturns, competitive pressures, unforeseen events that can result in reduced sales and revenue streams. A prime example is the global economic recession of 2018, which caused widespread revenue declines across multiple industries due to decreased consumer spending. Now, you can't mitigate something like that, but you have to be able to understand and assess how that is going to impact you as an organization. So this really goes back to what you were saying with the scenario planning, the scenario mapping. You have to be able to plan and run through a process of saying, well, what would happen if we were to head into another recession, which, say, for example, there was added revaluation of the euro. How will that affect us in the long term? Then there's the impact of cyber attacks causing disruption to IT systems and business processes, and how this could potentially lead to downtime, how it could impact your productivity losses. And you will need to look around to see what has happened in the real world and take that as an example and see how that can impact you as a business. For example, if you were to think of ransomware, you could take a look at something like the attack on Colonial Pipeline in 2021, which disrupted fuel supplies along the US East Coast. That caused widespread operational disruptions and financial losses. How would you as an organization prepare to recover from something like a ransomware attack? Do you have decent backups in place? Have you practiced restoring from those backups? Are those backups segregated from your everyday network? Are they isolated? Do you have offsite backups in place? Would you be able to recover from a ransomware attack? Then we have things like cybersecurity incidents, including things like data breaches. So how do you handle data breaches? Have you got your sensitive information isolated? Is it protected? Is it encrypted? Do you have access controls in place on the sensitive data? Do you have logs in place? Are you looking at those logs? Are you reviewing things? Because incidents that involve data breaches, which can compromise sensitive information and intellectual property, can result in reputational damage and financial liabilities. And let's look at another example. I'm having fun with my examples. The data breach at Equifax in 2017. That exposed the personal information of millions of consumers, led to legal settlements, and it completely eroded the customer trust in Equifax. See, the impact of supply chain risk extends far beyond the operational and financial implications. It can profoundly affect an organization's reputation and brand integrity. And several key factors play significant roles in shaping stakeholder perceptions and trust. Instances of product defects, for example, contamination or safety hazards, can tarnish brands' reputation and erode customer trust. For example, the recall of defective automobile airbags by Takata Corporation in 2013 resulted in widespread safety concerns and significant damage to that company's reputation, impacting consumer confidence and market share. And increasingly, consumers are scrutinizing companies' ethical and environmental practices and holding them accountable for social responsibility. Supply chain practices that involve labor exploitation, environmental degradation, or unethical sourcing can trigger public outrage and damage brand reputation. Poor customer service experiences, including delayed responses. I think you mentioned that earlier, Kevin. Product defects or inadequate support can lead to negative word of mouth publicity and diminished brand loyalty. So what are you as an organization doing? Are you considering your customer service as an area for impacting the business from a risk perspective, in the fact that you are delivering poor customer service and the knock-on effects of that customer service? An example of that could be the incident that United Airlines had in 2017, where a passenger was forcibly removed from an overbooked flight, and the incident was put out on social media, which sparked widespread condemnation and backlash against the airline's customer service practices and resulted in a downturn in bookings, however temporary that was. Then you've got data breaches involving customer information, which can have severe repercussions on brand reputation and consumer trust. There was the high-profile data breaches such as the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal back in 2018, which exposed the misuse of personal data and fueled concerns over personal privacy and data security, prompting public backlash and regulatory scrutiny. And so what are you as an organization doing with your data? Do you have your data mapped? Do you know where you are storing your data? Do you know who has access to that data? Do you know what that data is used for? Do you still need that data? When was the last time you ran through a data impact assessment on the data stores that you hold on your premises? Is the data center where you're storing your data. Have you looked at their recent SOC reports? Do they have SOC reports? What are their processes in place? And this is where the supply chain, you as the organization have to be really proactive in your supply chain to make sure that you're accounting for the risks that may or may not occur. There's unethical business practices, executive misconduct, or governance failures that can undermine stakeholder confidence and erode trust in an organization's leadership. And an example of that would be the Wells Fargo fake account scandal in 2016, where employees opened millions of unauthorized accounts to meet sales targets, which damaged the bank's reputation and resulted in regulatory penalties and executive resignations. Supply chain risks have far-reaching implications for reputation management, and they do necessitate proactive risk mitigation and transparent communication. Prioritising ethical conduct, environmental stewardship, and customer-centric practices, organisations can mitigate reputational risks and uphold their trust in their brands amid the complexities of the modern supply chain landscape. I'm just full of the joys of spring, Reed, today. I've got another 3 examples of supply chain risk, starting in 2015 with the Xcode Ghost exploit, where Chinese iOS developers were compromised when attackers added malicious code to the tool, which incorporated into several iOS apps on the App Store. And the reason I put that one there is because that incident highlights the importance of secure development tools and the need to thoroughly screen third-party components within the software supply chain. Another example I've got up here is TSMC, the semiconductor company, Taiwanese semiconductor company, who in 2018 malware was spread throughout the company's software update system. The virus was injected into TSMC's system when a supplier installed infected software onto some of its machines without running an antivirus scan. So it's the supplier that's at fault, not TSMC, but it's TSMC that suffered the consequences because the attack affected over 10,000 devices within TSMC's advanced facilities. And look, it's my favorite again, SolarWinds. In December 2020, the network management software company SolarWinds got hacked, resulting in a widespread breach of multiple government agencies and private companies. And it's a total of 18,000 customers and businesses got impacted. And the attack was traced back to a malicious software update added to SolarWinds Orion software. And again, this is demonstrating the importance of secure software updates within the supply chain. So a whole bunch of bleak news you've passed on me there, Kevin. But what strategies can you suggest we've got for mitigating the supply chain? Give these people some hope, please.
Well, it's not all doom and gloom. There is, of course, a number of things that I'm sure many of you are doing today in order to reduce the potential impact of those supply chain risks and vulnerabilities. So, as we kind of mentioned, they're pretty much the flip side of the issues that we've talked about. So, having flexibility and alternative sourcing capabilities. So that could be as complex as who's my raw material supplier for oil or steel or whatever it may be, or it can be as simple as what we talk to a lot of our customers about when we talk about business continuity. Have I simply identified who I would use if this supplier stopped being available to me? And that could be, it could be a data center, it could be a ticketing system, it could be, you know, something I use for compiling code, whatever it may be. Do I know where I would go so I don't have to go through the process of identifying an alternative supplier while I'm under pressure, having lost access to the tools that I'm currently using? And then, of course, the security practices, the process of assessing and understanding the security posture of those suppliers. So most of us are doing that today. Most of us, anyone who is has an ISO certification, is at least dipping their toe in that process of, at a minimum, identifying what security certifications our suppliers have, through to the other end of the scale, which is actually putting somebody on site to review their security controls and audit them internally. But somewhere along the line, really kind of ensuring that those things that we are relevant to the services that you are purchasing from that supplier are in place. And that's the critical part. Just because they're ISO certified, is it the product that I'm purchasing, and is it relevant to the services that I am paying for from this organization? A thing that Steve mentioned, collaboration is absolutely key in this process, and maintaining that conversation with those critical suppliers where possible to ensure that there is an ongoing dialogue, that you're understanding what issues that they're facing, that they're communicating with you about the challenges that that are up and coming, and in order for you to be able to manage that relationship effectively. That can be quite straightforward, dependent on who those suppliers are. If you are a small business and you're talking to AWS, then obviously that's a little bit more difficult. But wherever possible, increasing collaboration can only benefit your organization. Understanding all of these things, having a view across the out to the horizon will enable you to adapt to potential changes and things that are coming down the pipeline. Dependent on the scale of your reliance on your supply chain, depends on how much time you need to be spending in order to scan the horizon for those potential shifts in markets and regulatory compliance that are going to impact us all. Geographical spread seems like a pretty obvious thing. Am I able to get access to services and products from a number of different areas to reduce localized disruptions? But we're all doing it today. If possible, we are hosting our data in multiple data centers in different geographical locations in order to reduce the potential risk should something really horrible happen. Making sure that even though it seems like a straightforward thing, that we have considered it as a mitigating control in reducing our potential risk. And moving on to the kind of avoidance strategies, and these are kind of the same sort of things as you'd expect in any good risk management framework. Can you offset some of these things with insurance, dependent on what that reliability is and the understanding of the potential financial impact of the loss of those suppliers? Good, tight contractual agreements, not necessarily about holding your suppliers to ransom, but being really clear about who's accountable for what in that process, and should it fail, that there is clarity in that process, so there isn't an ongoing legal conversation subsequent to an issue, but a really clear understanding of who's accountable for what and what happens next and what are the steps that are in place. And then that kind of rolls across to those data processing agreements. So should your supplier be accountable for processing your data in some way? Do we have clear processing agreements that align to the relevant legislation in that area? So GDPR, UK GDPR, CCPA, whatever that may be, in order to ensure that everyone understands the accountability within the processing of that data. And that kind of crosses over then into like the nearshoring. So nearshoring can be as clear as, can I get my product and raw materials within the country, but also from a data processing perspective, reducing the number of borders you cross and the number of legislations that are brought to bear within the transfer of that data can only simplify the process and potentially reduce risks of being caught out against the ever-changing landscape of privacy requirements. And I think in our recent webinar, we pointed out that these are increasing on an annual basis in all regions all over the globe. So there are a number of things to consider in terms of just reducing the risk overall. So Steve, we mentioned resilience a few times, and I think that is critical. What are the things that we can do to effectively build that in?
I think one of the best ways to build in resilience is to start from having a good sound risk management framework to provide you with a structured approach to understanding and prioritizing potential threats, which would allow a business to allocate resources effectively and focus on areas of greatest concern. And a proactive stance not only helps prevent costly disruption, but it also fosters a culture of risk awareness and preparedness throughout the organization. So by having a risk management framework in place, organizations can systematically identify, assess and prioritize risks, and this enables them to make the organizations to make informed decisions. So you get this informed decision-making process as decision makers have a clearer understanding of potential threats and their potential impact on the organization's objectives. And with this information, organizations can allocate resources more effectively, prioritize risk mitigation efforts, and seize opportunities with a better understanding of the associated risks. And implementing a risk management framework also helps organizations to build resilience against potential threats and uncertainties by proactively identifying those risks. And the best way, I think, to do that is always to work with the people that are closest to the action. So rather than sitting with doing the risk assessments right up in the senior management teams, it always, for me, I always feel it's better to get down to the shop floor and ask the guys on the shop floor who are dealing with the suppliers, who are interacting, who are maybe loading the vehicles, who are helping to write the code, and who are interacting with the suppliers. What are the risks that they can see in the supply chain when they're there working in a day-to-day basis with the suppliers? Get those people involved so that that whole risk awareness flows down, and then feed up to the senior management team the risks that the shop floor is identifying, the risks that development team are seeing in the day-to-day operations that they're going. Because this proactive approach, it enhances the organization's stability and gives it the ability to navigate through these uncertain and challenging situations, and safeguards its longer term success and sustainability. I don't know if that's kind of the sort of thing that you were hoping I was going to say, Kev.
Absolutely, Steve. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we've talked about the specific steps around, identifying and managing and mitigating the risks for supply chain, but it's a good reminder to apply what most organizations have in place around risk, and we often get lost in the internal risk, the things that we can see and the things that we can manage, the things that are easy to control by bringing in a new tool or applying a change because we have control of it. It's much more difficult when it comes to suppliers, in that we can't physically change those things, but we can at least understand them and plan for them. And I think, the slide here, that culture of risk awareness goes beyond suppliers and about driving that through from the leadership level all the way down through an organization, and enabling people to feel comfortable and confident and understand what risk means, and then being able to identify them in order to protect the organization going forward, moving away from that situation where, it doesn't have to be a whistleblowing situation. It can be simply, I've spotted this, and that people will thank them for that, as opposed to scold them for, putting blockers in the way, because that's not the way in which we want businesses to operate. But bringing that culture in is a massive step, and where I've worked with organizations that have a very mature approach to risk, it feels much more open and much more effective, and people are much more confident in being able to believe that they are going to be able to deliver the things that they say they are going to.
Cool.
And you've got that lovely little slide next, haven't you, Steve? The VAR, where we've kind of
looked at. We are going to a VAR decision, aren't we? We are going to
a VAR decision.
We'll have to stop you here. We're going to a VAR decision, Steve.
Yeah, I see. This is the VAR decision. So why did the soccer team hire a video assistant referee? to improve their visibility, agility, and resilience? It's because they needed someone to ensure they never miss a goal, help them swiftly adapt to the opponent's strategies, and bounce back from any setback, even if it takes a few replays to get it right. But there you go. I even got a joke into a webinar. It's got to be a first. The poor joke at that. But listen, we're talking here about visibility, agility, and resilience. It's the VAR advantage. And these are essential attributes for effectively responding to supply chain disruptions. Visibility allows organizations to gain real-time insights into their supply chain operations. It enables proactive identification of potential disruptions. And when we talk about agility, what we mean there is, we mean quick adaptation and response to unforeseen events, such as changes in demand, which we mentioned earlier, or supplier disruptions, which I think I haven't stopped mentioning since the webinar began. And resilience by that, it ensures that the company have the ability to recover swiftly from disruptions, minimizing downtime and financial losses. And really, I think resilience is just another word for business continuity. And this graph that we have here on the screen, you can see that we've got two lines. The blue line represents an organization that hasn't prepared for disruption, and the orange line is referred to as a disruption responders. They're the people that have had a look at their supply chain and have said, well, what would happen if this occurs? And if that occurs, then we do this. And you can see here that the people that have a better preparedness for disruption are able to recover quicker. So the interruption in their ability, in their supply, in their operational capability is way, way less than the people that don't prepare. So it goes back to that old adage, fail to plan, plan to fail. And taken together, visibility, agility, and resilience, these capabilities enable organizations to navigate challenges with greater efficiency, to maintain continuity of operations, and uphold customer satisfaction. And ultimately, it enhances their competitiveness and sustainability within a dynamic market environment. That's my VAR slide, Kevin. I'm going to throw it back to you now, my friend. Have you got a sneaky tool for this?
We've got a sneaky tool for this, and we would be remiss not to mention it. So on the basis that we're having this conversation, we've spent a lot of time working with our customers in order to be able to understand their challenges with regards to more specifically managing their challenges with cybersecurity controls within their supplier base. And we've developed a product called Vendor, which supports that process, and that's really about more effectively being able to survey suppliers with regards to their security posture and to get those questionnaires out in an effective way, make it easy for them to be able to respond effectively and more quickly, and give the data that you need as a customer to be able to make sensible choices and understand their security position, and to understand the compliance requirements against any kind of regulations that may be impacting the relationship with that particular supplier, and then providing an understanding of how to effectively remediate those issues and maintain that that communication that we mentioned that's so important with those suppliers on an ongoing basis, be that annually or more frequently, in order to reduce potential risks. Perfect. But unless you've got anything else to say about Vendor, Steve?
No, just
fantastic.
Happy to show it to anybody who wants it.
Absolutely, it does a great little demo.
Brilliant. Guys, thank you. And what I'd love to finish with is just a huge thank you to Steve and Kevin for taking us through this. It's not an easy subject to cover off. It's certainly one that is not always at the forefront of board discussion or even team leadership discussion. My closing thoughts, and the guys will add any in due course, is that we we employ you to do your due diligence on your supply chain using those 3 steps. And like most things in cybersecurity, there is no silver bullet. But if we can come up with as near as damn it, we will all be in a safer place. So please do your due diligence on your supply chain. In ensuring that the supply chain risk is understood at the top levels of business is key, because ultimately, should we use a supplier that introduces vulnerabilities into our organisation, it's still our organisation that is accountable for that, whether it be through data loss or through disruption. And I think the last one, communication is key. Effectively communicate with your suppliers. They are there to support you as much as provide you a service. So the more you communicate with them, the more effective they will be in communicating with you, certainly around the associated risks to whether it be their data storage, etc. Steve, Kevin, any kind of finals from you before we close?
I think that sums it up very well indeed. I think the key thing is, however difficult it may be, continue to try and understand what's going on with that supply chain.
And all I'm going to say is a rising tide raises all boats. So let's all improve our security posture.
Lovely.
It wouldn't be a webinar without a Steve line at the end. Thank you ever so much. And gents, again, thank you to you both. For those of you that are not aware, we have one more left in this series, the Human Firewall. This is all about empowering your employees to do the right thing when it comes to information security. With that, we wish you a very good remainder of the day. And again, always please reach out to us should you need any questions answered. Other than that, we will leave you to your day. Thank you ever so much.